Hey, everybody, welcome to the Input Podcast. This is a podcast of faith and fandom. And what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about the things we're actually putting into our lives, from music to food to books to entertainment and things like that. So today I have Mike Perna joining me of Inroads Ministries. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do on Inroads and all? You do a lot,
I
but
I do a lot.
so
Um,
tell the people who you be.
the overall pitch for Inroads is that we are a nonprofit organization that works with church and community groups to help them use tabletop games to build community and to build the deep relationships that come from that community. That takes us to a lot of different places. Uh, we
Yes.
do we do consulting stuff. During these COVID times. A lot of it has just been talking to people and doing consulting, and which is fun, and it's an interesting animal. But I can't wait for this vaccine to get out there, and so we can get to tables again. Because I already have ideas of what I want to do. I hopefully want to get to play Extra Life, which is a big charity event for gamers every year. I've done it for
I've raised money for that before. Okay.
it's wonderful. I've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years I've done it. I want to do it again, and I'm in a new neighborhood now, so who knows who I might be able to get to play this year. So I hope to do that stuff. We do a little bit. We go to conventions. It's not our primary deal. Like, we only go to one or two, but we have a ton of fun with the ones we do go to. I dress up like a dwarf bard and act like an idiot asking for people's stories. So much fun. Um, I am well. Currently, I'm only doing one podcast, not including yours, obviously. But currently, I'm doing one podcast called The Bard and Bible. I'm often also on a show that has been. My co-host and I both have had scheduling nightmares due to quarantine and job and family and. So it's been on extended hiatus, but I'm also on the Game Store Profits podcast.
Tell me about that one, because that's another one that's recognizable in the geek ministry world.
Game Store Profits is literally Daniel Fisher and I. If you don't know who Daniel is, Daniel, if you've ever gone on YouTube and looked up a video for the saltwater dice test, that's Daniel. It's basically a way to check if your die is balanced. And yeah, Daniel's a little bit into dice, and so
I
he
have one set because they're pretty.
oh I
That's
let me
all
just
I
put it
got.
this way. I have a bag of dice over there, which I got because of Daniel. And I have my little bag with my super fancy fun one, which is steampunk designed, and little metal ones because they're really pretty, and they're called Bardic Purple, and I had to.
I had some metal ones that I got as a gift, and then I sold them at a con because they were my table display, and somebody like offered me way too
Somebody
much money.
about to say somebody really wanted them.
I sell. I don't know if you've ever seen in my faith and fandom stuff, but I actually sell D20 candles.
Yep.
So those are fun.
So Daniel and I basically get to, on Game Store Profits, talk about stuff that's going on in gaming, and then usually about halfway we do what we call making the turn, where we talk about Jesus. And it's not like we don't do it like some kind of Jesus juke. We don't just bring it out of nowhere. We literally do just say, "Hey, so this is the thing that we were talking about, and we wanted to talk about what we are thinking about with our faith and God and everything like that, church stuff." We always kind of weave that together, and it ends up being a really good time. And hopefully, Daniel and I can work at it, because the sad thing is that the all the people who run Inroads, not a one of us is in the same state currently.
Mhm.
And so it's always hard to coordinate getting everybody together when no one is in the same state. I think most of us are in different time zones. And so it's super complicated. But hopefully in the near future, Daniel and I will be able to work it out that we get Game Store Profits up again too.
Awesome. So first thing we're talking about the whole idea of the whole input. The one thing that kind of just like, not to just Jesus juke anything either, because that's the whole thing of the hard balance of being a pastor and being in like other ministries and stuff like that, is like where the appropriate line to cross what that is sometimes. Because usually I bring Jesus in like an awkward bear hug. Like,
I see this was I actually have had multiple articles on our site related to various shades of this. Uh the we have a thing at our game nights called the no preaching rule, and it's really funny for people to hear that when I say we're a Christian organization. But the reason the no preaching rule came out is because I've spent so many years in youth ministry where it's like, come see the cool thing, or come look at our giant inflatable games, or do all that, and then 30 minutes on a sermon that none of these kids asked for. And after I did it for so many years, I started to feel real dirty about that, because I basically felt that talking about Jesus became the way some people talk about selling timeshares.
mm,
Come win a boat. Oh, by the way, let's talk about this.
fair.
And so the no preaching rule is basically, we're not going to manufacture times when we talk about Jesus, because if Jesus is really who you say he is and you love him as much as you say you do, he's going to be part of your conversation. He's going to be part of your life. So you don't have to worry about manufacturing it. It just happens. When it just happens, it's a lot more natural. It makes sense to be there because you're not trying to shove him in there.
Yeah.
So that I have no problem riding that line hard, because it's literally like I thought it was, I was going to talk about Jesus anyway. We're just happen to be here at this point.
So that's how we arrived there.
That's how we got here.
The one thought, and I'm not even trying to like lay this as a hard like theme verse for this or anything, but like the one thing I was really just thinking about today was the thing out of Matthew 15, where it's like, it's not what goes into someone that defiles them, but what comes out of them. And so often we look, growing up in church culture, and or at least in my teenage years up, there was always this worry and fear of, don't let the kids put this in them, because it's going to ruin them. And a lot of it was like, just so looking back, it was astonishing how much fear like church culture had
Oh
of
yeah.
what kids were going to be entertained by. Dude, like I can't tell you how many copies of Hootie and the Blowfish's cracked rear view my youth pastor broke, because they
Oh
would do this
man.
thing where like, bring all your secular music in, we're gonna smash it.
No,
And I
no.
would always, I was like that people pleaser. I'd bring it in and then like go back to like FYE, or
And get it again.
hit it again. I bought so many copies. But that's the thing, like, and being with Faith and Fandom, and even what you do with, all the ways that you like focus on stuff that actually people connect over, like, rather than looking at what we input in our lives as the negatives, I'd rather look at it as whatever we're putting into our lives, there's probably things we can connect with. And so I want to talk about the things that we're actually inputting into our lives in different areas. So first off, the first one we're going to talk about is listening. So what are you listening to? Like what do you happily put in your ear holes?
Man, you had mentioned when we started thinking about what we were going to do here about talking about podcasts. I can't talk about podcasts because I have dozens. I can't. I work 8-hour shifts, in a job where I'm by myself. So I basically always have podcasts in my ear, which is funny because I you literally were the subject of one recently. I will literally say, okay, I know a lot of nerdy podcasters. I can't listen to everyone, but I have a hole in my schedule right now. Which one of you I'm not listening to should I start listening to? and it was right around then I'm like, oh, hey, there's a new pull list right now. I should go listen to the pull list. I haven't listened to the pull list yet. I'm already caught up on the pull list. So
Bananas.
I have podcasts. There's just too many. I listen to them constantly. I could go on for days just about that. So because we're on the internet, I'm going to say that when sea shanties came across the internet,
Thanks, TikTok.
no, I'm not gonna lie, I bit hard on the sea shanty thing. Specifically, There are two bands that really got me.
There's sea shanty bands?
Oh yes, there are. There are multiple sea shanty bands.
Because I saw people on TikTok doing sea shanties and people on Facebook. I didn't know it was a thing.
No, it's a
Go on, go
thing.
on.
There are two. There's one that I've been since I first started listening to the various renditions of the Wellerman. Um, the Longest Johns.
Ha.
Yeah, the
Okay.
the Longest Johns are four guys, and they do sea shanties. And it's every once in a while they'll throw in an original thing too, but it's like sea shanties, and it's like old, like the kind of things that you'd probably hear at the pub when the whalers come home, like that kind of stuff. It's all really really good, and I love it. And it actually, I'm not like, not with any kind of depth, but I've started kind of looking into what a sea shanty is, like what officially makes something a sea shanty. And a lot of it was literally just, these boats are big, and timing is really important when like one guy's messing with the rigging on one side of the boat and one guy's doing something else on the other side of the boat. Timing is really important. So they would sing these songs to set those guys up so that they were both on the same beat. And so like, it's listening to these songs and knowing that that's what it's doing, it's setting a rhythm so that guys all over the boat can be on the same page. It's really interesting to listen to those songs like that. So the Longest John's got me in it. And then I started, because Spotify playlists are a thing, I recently kind of expanded that and have been listening to the Dreadnoughts.
Okay.
And the Dreadnoughts are, I would say they're a rougher sound. Like the Dreadnoughts sound um like the guys have had a few too many grogs before they started singing. Like the Longest Johns are kind of very melodic, and every once in a while they'll get one with a little bit of stank on it, but the Dreadnoughts, they're always there. They're just there.
All right.
I'm telling you, man, I went hard.
Sea shanties with some stank on it.
I went hard. Like it's really fun. And one of the things that really entertained me about the Longest Johns is that, like I said, every once in a while they'll throw in an original one. And there's one of their songs where I can't remember the name of the actual song because I listened to them like back to back. But there's one song where it's basically them singing about being a guy who's out of work, and he goes and becomes a sea captain, but he has no idea how to run a boat or what it does or how to sail. So there's lines like what's that thing spinning? Somebody should stop it. Like it's just the most ridiculous nonsense ever. But they also have stuff that they've adapted. Like what are they called? The Last Bristolian Pirate. And it's basically this guy who's in England during a recession who lost his job, so he became a pirate on the river. It's amazing.
All right. So out of these folks that you're talking about, like what if somebody wanted to jump into sea shanties, what would you recommend, like as far as artist and album? Just those two, or
Those are the ones that I've done the most listening to. I also know, I don't know if the Dreadnoughts are on YouTube, but the Longest Johns are on YouTube. They also do streams. And one of the cool things that they do is that they'll all get on like Assassin's Creed Black Flag or Sea of Thieves. And so they'll be just going around in their boat on Sea of Thieves. Somebody will pull up, and if you've never played Sea of Thieves, if you get up close, you can actually hear what other people are saying. So these guys will come into their boat, and all of a sudden, you'll hear an entire shanty band like singing legit sea shanties. And it's fun to just see the reactions of other players as they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
that's amazing. Anything else you're listening to?
As far as music goes, not lately. Like I said, most of my time is podcasts. If you want, here, I'll try to break down some of the more entertaining ones. I'll try to pick out some highlights. As far as faith, because this is faith and fandom based, I've been listening a lot to the Holy Post, which is Phil Vischer, aka the guy who
Yeah,
made
Bob.
VeggieTales. Yeah. Phil Vischer and Sky Jitani and a couple other people who come in and out. And their stuff has been really, really good lately. Like really, really interesting and good. And I like it, and it's worth listening to. Um, as far as nerd stuff, I mean, yeah, there's a lot. We represent a lot of what I've been listening to in nerd stuff.
Fair.
um what let's see. As far as ridiculous, because of course you got to have some that are ridiculous. I have friends who I've met through, like, friends of friends of the podcasting world. And this was another one where they put out a podcast ages ago and I didn't listen to it. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm hitting a spot where I got nothing to listen to. I'm going to binge through their whole playlist. It's called Gilmore Ball Z. Literally, it's a husband and wife team, and they watch an episode of Gilmore Girls and an episode of Dragon Ball Z Kai, and they compare and contrast. It's amazing. They're almost done, like, because they pretty much decided that once they got to the end of both shows, they were just going to stop. So I'm kind of sad that they're going to stop, because it's all genius. I actually am going to be on a bonus episode. They're going to be, they did some fundraising. If you raise so much funds, they would do a bonus episode. I'm going to be on one soon, but they're finishing up their regular run. They've literally gone through every episode, and yeah, you'd be surprised at how much overlap there is.
That's bananas.
And funny, the one of the thing they do in each episode is they go, who do you want to swap? And they'll swap one character from Dragon Ball and one character from Gilmore and Gilmore Girls, and see how it changes.
I'm gonna have to check that out, because I literally can't even fathom the logistics of that. That's fantastic.
It's amazing. Gilmore Ball Z. Trust me, all you have to do is look that up. You'll find it everywhere, because nobody else is that crazy. Though, what they told me recently that there's another podcast out there that I haven't listened to. So anybody listening to this, don't take this as a recommendation, other than it's a similar concept. What was it? I think it's like Buffy the Gilmore Slayer or something like that.
Okay.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
See,
and
that
Gilmore
just
Girls.
makes more sense to me.
Right. But the whole thing started because he loved Dragon Ball and grew up watching Dragon Ball, and she loved watching Gilmore Girls. And they basically decided to make each other watch the other's favorite show. It's fun. It's so much fun.
Okay. On my end, some stuff I've been listening to, 5 Iron Frenzy, because as I break out the Zune.
Nice.
5 Iron Frenzy.
It seems very fitting to listen to that.
That's what I said. I posted that the day they dropped the album. I was like, there's no better way to listen to this in its current format than on a Zune. Dude, personally, a Zune is my preference. I use my phone for way too much work stuff,
right,
to be my music outlet, because if I use my phone as my music outlet, it's going to get interrupted constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I can fit 30,000 songs on here that isn't going to jack up my phone data,
right,
or get interrupted every time I get a notification or have to send a snap or whatever. I love my Zune. And they dropped an album. It was kickstarted, whatever the proper past tense that is. They dropped that album, and I was one of the first fun. Like, were you ever a 5 Iron person?
Ever? Yes. It's been a significant chunk of time, but I was definitely a 5 Iron person in their heyday.
Yeah. I really, really loved them in their, it's one of those, the tragedies of life situations. My first 5 Iron concert was the first concert they announced they were quitting.
Oh no.
And so, like, I literally traveled forever to get to a Cornerstone Music Festival to hear them play. And then, like, literally 2 songs deep, so we were going to announce this is part of our last series of shows, and I'm just like
Oh no.
literally like weeping in the mosh pit. Um, but I was a big fan, and like, were you aware of what they did with their comeback like about 8 years ago?
I that skipped me. I did not know that was a thing.
Okay, so the band ended on November 22nd, 2003. It was their official "We Quit" day. Um, they recorded a live album, called it a day. So they were only a band from '95 until 2003. So it's like only 8 years.
Right.
Um, Fast forward, and so by the way, if you ever listen to their final album recording, even though it's not the final, somewhere in the stupid dialogue of that concert, Reese Roper says, "Hey, you can't heckle us. It's 5 Iron Frenzy Day." Just talking.
Right.
The devoted nerds of 5 Iron Frenzy turned it into a holiday.
Of course they did.
And like my family had celebrated 5 Iron Frenzy Day every day since every November 22nd since then, where we have 5 Iron Frenzy themed food, and we do stupid stuff
Nice.
like hit
Nice.
bags of milk as pinatas with 5 irons in the backyard, like all the things. Like
Okay.
my kids grew up with it. So 5 Iron site had been dead for like 8 years, hadn't done anything. And then all of a sudden a countdown started. And
That's always fun.
the countdown led to an announcement on 5 Iron Frenzy Day with a new song and that they were coming back. So they kickstarted for an album. Now, if I'm fudging on the numbers, but I'm pretty sure I'm right that the goal was to get $30,000 to put out a new album. They had $264,000 in 4 minutes. And it was like boom.
Well, I mean, I would imagine so because like back when 5 Iron was doing their thing, there were a handful of bands doing what 5 Iron was doing. Like people love 5 Iron, but there were people doing it. Now there's who is doing what 5 Irons was doing. Like, is that even a thing anymore? You know, are a lot more familiar with the music scene than I am.
Well, that's the thing. 5 Iron's not even doing 5 Iron anymore, not to that effect.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot more punk rock than it was like goofy horns and stuff. But like so they did their Kickstarter, they put their album out. I think they had 2 really small tours. And then they dropped out again. They all went back to their day jobs, did their things, and then finally like I want to say the other album dropped in 2013. And so they went another 8 years before dropping another one.
Before putting another one out.
And so like they finally kickstarted that one again. And so I was super pumped to get another 5 Iron album. And I will say this, it is not my favorite album that they ever did. And one of the main members of the band was on the podcast recently, and you know, like when the Kickstarter had just happened, and I enjoy the album. Here's why it's not my favorite album. Most albums are usually reflective of the time period that they're created in. I don't want a 2020 album.
Right. Nobody wants that.
And in a lot of ways, this is a 2020 album.
Okay.
All the social injustice, all the political bitterness, all the like, this is literally like putting the last year in your ears.
So that's like, you know, come like 5, maybe 10 years down the road, you're like, this is genius. But right now it's like, this sucks.
And that's literally what it is. Like it's brilliant. But on the flip side, like 5 Iron's history, one of the reasons they broke up is because 2 of the band members like renounced their faith.
That'd do it.
So in
I remember vaguely hearing about that.
Yeah. So in 2003, 2 of the band members renounced their faith, and they're like, "Well, rather than just replacing people, let's go ahead and go be adults." And somewhere along the line, over the last 16 years of growth and maturity, they're like, we can still work together. Like, we're not going to make you censor everything or, force anything. Like, they came to a good understanding of family and everything else. And like, so there's still like some of the most biblical and encouraging songs were off of their album after they came back together, where not everybody was believers. Um, but this one like has some stank towards the church, but appropriately. Like the church aligning
I am actually a fan of appropriate levels of stank on the church. I think we need it.
there's a song on here called While Supplies Last.
Okay.
Um equating the mass courting, political spewing, poking the fires of everything to there's even a line that you blame your decline on the LGBTQ, but your poison is what's poisoning you. And like it's just like, okay.
All right.
But they go hard, but like it's still honest. But like one of the other lines, like, though all have fallen short of sin, the wound is where the light shines in. I mean, it's just like, okay. And there's lots of good biblical stuff in it, but there's two tracks that are my favorite, and I can't say this word properly, and I don't expect this to. Oh, you might be able to read it on camera, but it'll be right way when it actually shows up. Um, but it's Huefana. It's
Okay.
you tell me how you pronounce this. Huerfano.
As close as I'd get to it.
Yeah, it's not said anywhere in the song,
Okay.
so I don't know what to say. That one is amazing, but my happy-go-lucky, warm fuzzy song is there's a track on here called "So We Sing,"
Okay.
um, um, and it's like the chorus is "Now fly you orphans, here you belong, welcome you wayward souls, now lift your song." Well, that's actually the Porferno one, but like the chorus of this one's like, "I need a low dose of you believing me, I need a sheet cake made of victory," and it's just like
Oh, I love it.
that's just like, and so people have started sending them sheet cakes that say victory.
Of
And
course.
so that's been a thing. And then the other big thing I've really been listening to, Judah from Judah and the Lion.
I've heard
Um,
of Judah and the Lion. I have never heard Judah and the Lion.
if you go back to like a decade ago, maybe, what year is this? Yeah. Um, if you go back probably like 2015, Judah and the Lion was straight up Mumford and Sons.
Okay.
It was a young Mumford and Sons from Tennessee. Um, they were very, very just banjos and acoustic and leaves and grass and yeehaws and the whole thing.
Right.
Um, but before that, they were a worship band. I met them as a band when they were, and this tells you the level of success they were at this point in time. They hadn't put out an album, and they were leading worship at the prayer breakfast before a conference started.
Okay.
So that's like, all right, so here's where we are. But fast forward like a few years, like by 2016, 2017, they were either headlining stadium tours or opening for headliners. Like the first time I saw them in, like, I'd seen them in a small little club venue with maybe 200 people in it, and then a year later they were the opening act for like a 46,000 stadium.
All right.
And they were opening for 21 Pilots. Then the year after that they were doing their own thing. So they literally are one of, and especially they write a lot of, they went from straight worship to folk to their album that really kicked them off was Folk Hop and Roll.
Okay.
And it's straight up a mix of folk music, a little bit of hip hop beats, and like stadium rock.
Okay. That is a combination I could see myself getting into.
And that's honestly what sold me. Like one of the college students I was working with said, "Dude, you got to check out Folk Hop and Roll." And it's like straight up like banjos playing hip hop beats over like stadium rock vocals. Um
Going to check this album out now on
uh
Spotify.
Folk Hop and Roll Deluxe. uh check that out. That's the one. Um
Okay.
but so I and then Pep Talks was their album after that, and Pep Talks and Folk Pop and Roll hugely successful. As far as albums, ESPN used them for like every other commercial. They're in movies. Like they blew up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I noticed as the success meter rose, like the spiritual content, like
That is
dive
often
bombed.
how it goes.
Um, and that's the thing. I'm not going to judge your entire spiritual life, or not that I have any place to, based on how much is in your content, of your art. But I had to say I truly missed what I'd originally seen them as.
Right.
And then so one of my friends just posted, I heard this really good album today. It's called Seven by someone named Judah. And I trusted the person who posted it. So I went to go listen to it, and I didn't realize that it was Judah of Judah and the Lion.
Mm.
And so in the middle of them at their height of success as a big band, he put out a worship album, or a worshipful album. It's not like one you're going to sing on Sundays,
Right.
um, like with repetitive choruses and stuff like that. But dude, like, it is hands down the most spiritually cathartic album I've listened to in forever. It's only got 7 songs, but there's a track on there called I Am that is Jesus singing to us through our struggles.
Okay.
Um but it's and literally, like, I made it through like probably half of that song before I was snotty eyed and just like teary and dripping, and I was like, oh man, this is fantastic. So I've literally been keeping those two things kind of on repeat. I also have had a pretty healthy to unhealthy level of Tobe Nwigwe. If
That's
you've
a name I haven't heard before.
Okay, Tobe Nwigwe is the new hotness in hip hop music, but for 89.9% of all of his stuff, it's clean. All of the women in his videos are dressed ridiculously modest.
Okay.
Um, and he is very passionate about Jesus and his wife. His wife and children are in every music video. Um, but he's passionate about Jesus, but he also says, at least once per song, by the way, this is the gun I gave my wife and she'll shoot you if you mess with her. So
All
it's
right.
like, it's kind of like that, but like they've brought in, even if you weren't a big fan of Outkast or anything back in the early 2000s, you could tell they were like theatrically, like they were the big thing of like performance wise.
Right.
He's that for this generation. I've not seen hip hop music on this level of artistry in the last 20 years.
Wow.
So like my kids will like come home from school and just, or like be done with school and say, can we watch all of Toby's videos? And so it's like, I've got a 7-year-old like quoting a song called Headshots. And I'm like, okay.
All right.
It's all clean, but it's also really, really good. So that's kind of what I've been listening to pretty much. I am When I podcast, I binge podcast, and it usually has to be where I can, because my kids hate me listening to podcasts in the car.
Well,
And
yeah, I don't do it when my son's in the car either.
that's the thing. I don't have a lot of time where I have time to listen without someone else in my ear needing me.
Mm.
So it's a harder thing. So what are you reading? Like, what are you much like reading right now? Like, what's your thing?
I have one that I just finished, and some gentleman on the internet told me about it.
Can't trust people on the internet.
If you can't guess, people at home, Hector recommended this one. Hector and Chris from the pull list plug. Um, Basically, in my binge, like I said, that I binged through their stuff. Um, I just heard them talk about this book about Judas, and I'm like, that sounds really stinking interesting. How much is it on Amazon? Oh, it's like $10 for the whole collected book. I'm getting this. Uh, it is super gorgeous. Like I'd hold it up to the camera, but it wouldn't do it justice. Get the
Mhm.
book. Um, it's super interesting. It basically, obviously, it's extra biblical stuff because this doesn't exist in scripture, but it's literally like you meet Judas in hell shortly after he dies. And he like he's talking to Lucifer. He's there because there are no matter where you find yourself, there are theological schools that say the 3 days that Jesus between when Jesus died and Jesus was resurrected, the 3 days he spent in hell.
Yep, and it's even in the Apostles' Creed. So
It is in the Apostles' Creed. Um, so he's there, and Judas basically confronts this Jesus after his death. Pardon me. It's really interesting. Like some of the decisions that the authors made were really interesting. Um, I I would kind of bring one up, but it's literally the end of the book, so I'm not going to. But it's super like if you're looking for like deep theological treatise, don't read Judas. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to tell you a story that will make you think theologically, definitely read Judas.
I love the fact that too, even though as the book is ending, they're ending it with scripture.
Oh yeah.
And I
There,
was like,
there's Bible throughout the whole thing.
yeah, I was like, and that's the thing. It made me look at theologically some things, just examine my heart on some stuff. And I was like, it impacted me probably more than any comic book I've read in a minute.
Well,
Um,
and as I told you guys, both of you, when shortly after I finished reading it, of all the depictions of the devil in creative ever, for the longest time there was only one that I was like, this is the closest we've gotten, and that's Gaiman's depiction of Lucifer in Sandman.
I always loved Al Pacino's and The Devil's Advocate.
I like that one too, but it's Al
It's
Pacino.
yeah, it's
Like
Al Pacino. It's if you had had
it's
somebody
not
else
a
do
good
that,
depiction of the devil. It's Al Pacino, just
yeah.
being Al Pacino. But so that the picture of Gaiman. This is now. I still think Lucifer in Gaiman is my favorite, but this is now number two because they do such a good job of one depicting him. In this one, it's interesting because Gaiman goes through the whole idea of Lucifer, the angel, before he fell, was the most gorgeous, wonderful, powerful angel depicted. And so when you see him in Gaiman's books, it's like he's still gorgeous. Like he's not as much as what he was, but he like everyone wants the devil to be this twisted, malformed thing. It's like who's ever going to listen to that guy? This one, it does make him a little more rough around the edges and dirtier, but you still have that. No, I could see when you were a thing. Like this is just you after a really hard time. Like, but I can see you being, and the things that he's saying are not far off from the truth, which is the thing that really struck true to me. Is like Satan's not going to tell you a lie that's so obviously false that you're like, well, no one's going to listen to this. Everyone knows this is wrong. He's going to tell you one with just enough truth in it to go, huh? Do you ever do you ever think about that? And this they do the writing they do in this book is so good.
It is. And I think one of my favorite things in it, and two, is just I think this is one of the parts that hit me theologically. And I remember the first time I read it, I was sitting in my church's office space at that time, and I was totally zoned out of a staff meeting and just reading this book. And I got to the page of the not the crucifixion, but the of what it would look like for Jesus to take on our sins in hell.
Oh yeah.
And it's very similar to the idea of the crucifixion, but like literally just seeing our sins like encompass him and stuff. I was like, nope, too much. I was like,
Yeah.
dude, it hit me hard. And I think that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, it's very good. It's very, very good. It was and speaking of Gaiman, This one's more aspirational. I only just started it. I got this at Christmas. I've only just been able to pick it up and start reading it.
Oh yeah.
I have a thing for Norse mythology. I have a thing for mythology in general, mythology and folklore, but Norse mythology specifically is my jam. Um, People would have a different opinion of Loki if they realized what his kids look like. Um,
Oh, which dude, by the way, like there's a big thing with that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
is there really?
And honestly, that's where I actually learned about Loki's kids.
Yeah, Loki. Like you've heard about like when gods of various pantheons have kids, they're all like they grow up to be heroes or legends or gods in their own right. Loki, his kids are a wolf, Odin's horse. Like Loki has some weird kids.
I was like, how do you have a baby with a frost giant and make a wolf? I was like, how does that work?
Because you're Loki.
Yeah.
But so this is Neil Gaiman basically doing his spin on some of the major stories of Norse mythology. I love Gaiman as an author. I love Norse mythology. I'm super excited to get into this book. I One of the things that I really love about Norse mythology, and it's been interesting because people who want to prove to me that God doesn't exist will bring up things like Norse mythology
Like the similarities and different things.
of the Odin story, the story of Odin hanging on a tree so that he could save the world. He had a spear shoved in his side, and they're like, "Sound familiar?" I go, "Uh huh." But like most things, when people point out the similarities, I'm going, "Have you ever noticed the differences in the story, though?" Because one of the things that it always strikes me about reading the story of Odin hanging from the tree and Christ hanging from the tree is that Odin hung on the tree to give himself power. Is it so he could learn the spells, get the power? He hung himself on that tree to make himself better. Whereas Christ kind of did the exact opposite.
Yeah, for real.
And so it's like, yes, there are detailed similarities to this story. The content of this story is incredibly different. And I'm really interested to see because American Gods is one of my favorite books of all fiction. Um, if you ever really want to have an interesting conversation with me, read the author's preferred version, the anniversary version of American Gods to see uh, what I refer to as Gaiman's American Jesus. Because if you don't know the whole plot of American Gods, the really broad strokes is that when people came to America to settle the country, they brought their gods with them. And so there's an American version of all these old gods. And so at one point, it didn't make the actual book. And I think it was a good decision of his editors to not put it in the book. But he's like, it's good and it's bad enough that or it didn't fit well enough that he wanted it out of the book, but it's good enough that he wanted it in the anniversary edition as an appendix. And people got real bent out of shape when they realized that he was going to do a depiction of Jesus in the same context of all these other gods. But I'm going to tell you, man, his depiction of a definitively American Jesus, yeah, it's going to make a brother think. It's really interesting. So I'm really curious to see what he does with this mythology.
Okay. Well, that's the thing too. Like, I've thought the concept was interesting, and I know that the guy from I can't think of his name right now, but like I've seen more of the show than of the book, but I've thought of checking it out.
I have the show too.
What's the guy that's he was on Battlestar Galactica? James Edward Olmos.
Yes.
Who is he on there?
Uh, I don't know. I only have season 1, so if he
Okay.
doesn't show up in season 1, I don't know.
Okay, he's the old one that's kind of like the main dude on the more recent stuff. All right. Anything else you're reading?
Reading, Not really, man. It's hard. I have a 3-year-old,
Oh, trust me.
so it's hard to sit down and read. Part of the reason why I got Judah done is because it's a graphic novel. I sat down and read it. I just got it done.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's pretty much as far as reading goes. That kind of taps me out because there's lots of stuff I want to read. I have piles of books. It's
I
hard
have so many
going.
books that I started or sort of reading, and
Right.
it's um one of the things I'm reading right now, and I'd say this is probably like the my biggest recommendation on a spiritual level if you get a minute, and it's the chapters are ridiculously short, easy reads. Um but a friend of mine, another podcaster friend, recommended this. It's called Drop the Stones by Carlos Rodriguez. um I wasn't ready for this.
Okay.
This is definitely up my alley in terms of like dialogue and empathy and things like that. Um, but I wasn't ready for what it looks like. But basically, it approaches a bunch of different situations from the perspective of the woman caught in adultery.
Okay.
Um, the first few pages are actually like a fictional dialogue of the guys planning to catch this woman so they can string up Jesus. Uh,
Wow.
and but I mean, dude, it honestly, when I've read it, it reminded me of Bard and Bible. Um,
Hey.
because it literally goes from a fictional narrative to, all right, let's talk about
Let's
this.
talk about this thing that yeah.
And I was like, um, and I was like, oh man, but dude, the I had made it like 4 pages into this, and I was openly weeping in a Sonic parking lot. Um,
Wow.
because the first chapter talks about this pastor wanted to he was a young pastor at that point, and he wanted to get he's talking about retrospectively in his own selfish motives. He could see that he wanted to do prison ministry so he could get famous for doing prison
Yeah,
ministry.
for doing yeah.
And he's like, I want to just get like 10 prisoners saved so I can write a book about prison ministry. um but he was speaking to a prison that was specifically for or a section of a prison that was specifically for sexual predators.
Oh boy.
um and if you're listening to this or watching this, this next part has a, I don't, moderate to severe trigger warning. I don't know, it sounds like eczema, but like it's a sensitive subject. But the first chapter, he's in the middle of preaching to a room full of sexual predators, and because I'd mess this up if I said any other way. He said God starts speaking to his heart, and he says this: "Tell the men who have sexually abused their daughters that I forgive them." And I'm just like literally waiting on my tots to come out at Sonic, and I'm like, what? And he's it, and he literally goes on to be like, no, God, I'm not saying that. And so he's
Right.
like preaching and like having this debate with God in his head and his heart while he's doing that. And he says God just kept hitting him. And he's like, I'll start a riot, blah blah blah. And he was just like, there's this whole thing just 2 pages deep into it, he's like fighting with God. um and he's talking about how he knows that people that are reading this book have been abused, and like how unfair it must, he says, I can't even imagine how unfair it must feel. And one of the reasons I was so against saying what God was telling me to say was because I pictured my niece and felt such anger in that moment that I wanted to punch these men, not heal them. And he says, yet it was reckless mercy that arrested me, irrational love that took over, and in a great moment of weakness, I agreed with God's version of the gospel. And I'm like, oh dang.
Dang
Um,
it. You're gonna make me buy things again.
um, so he goes on, and he finally get mans up, and he's like tells these people what God said. Um, He says, yes, I told the men in front of me that they were exonerated from the vilest act. So the room went quiet, the air got thicker, and I fully experienced the words of Richard Rohr: before the truth sets you free, it tends to make you miserable. Um, he said, he's just he said it again. He said, in that moment, a man seated in the second row to my right stood up as if he were about to collapse and shouted with all his might, Maria, Maria, perdoneme. He said he was asking his daughter to forgive him. Um, he said, I had good ethical, biblical grounds to stone that man, maybe not in the flesh, but at least in my heart. But as I saw the liquid repentance streaming down his face, I remembered my own sin, and I was glad that God who saved me was not a monster like me or him. And dude, that's like page 4.
Yeah.
And like then there's a chapter about dealing with like him coming to repentance over the homeless guy he passed in front of his church every day for years but never actually tried to minister to. And like there's all these things of like what happens when you actually drop the stones in the people you deal with. And
Right.
dude, I'm only like on chapter 4, and like I have to take this thing in spurts because my heart can't take it.
I'm about to say it seems a little intense right there.
It is. I mean, it definitely levels off a little more mellow, but dude, it's kicked me. It kicked my heart in the throat every chapter I've read. The other thing I'm reading right now, and honestly, I'm letting my Amazon robotic device do the work for me because it's a lot easier. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but like one of my favorite shortcuts to reading currently is if you buy a book on Kindle, not an Audible, but a Kindle book, any Amazon device will read it to you.
We'll read it for you.
And so I've been having mine read me Ready Player 2 while I'm working on things. I recently took over all the graphic design for my church. And so I'm spending a lot more time like dragging things and fading things. And so I'm like having to do that. Honestly, I've had a ball doing that. And dude, if for the people that read Ready Player 1, it's near miserable for like the first 8 chapters. It's like, like it's just hard to read because it's boring.
Okay.
For the first 8 chapters, like because it literally is like 8 chapters of describing high school in the future.
Right.
And then this one like is very similar of like the first chunk, maybe first 100 pages is setting up for the big conflict to happen.
Okay.
But dude, once the big conflict happens, it's game on. And it's been delightful, but like I don't know.
I don't know. I've heard so many weird, varied opinions on Ready Player 2. I don't know.
Well, and trust me, I can honestly understand every one of them. Like from the people that are excited about it to the people, because there's definitely stuff like I have a 13-year-old who's also reading it, and like she knows biblical foundation, and so like she'll stick her head around her, Dad, I just came across this part of the book. Is it okay if I still read it? I'm like, are you conflicted in what you believe? Is it a concern for question? Is it affecting your life? Okay, finish it. I don't care. And that's the thing is like, if you need to have an honest discussion about what you just read, go for it. But like, there's like a whole, just where I'm at, I think I'm near the end of the book. But like, there's a whole chunk dedicated to John Hughes films in this one.
Okay.
Like there's a planet of John Hughes films.
Of course there is.
There's a planet of Prince.
Okay.
Where there's a gigantic battle with 7 different versions of Prince. That's a musical battle.
Of course.
And then there is a giant epic beyond epic battle that takes place in the first age of men in Middle Earth.
Nice.
I
was we got to get that epic nerd in there somewhere.
Well, that's part of the problem. Like one of the things, the themes is like the main character that's dealing with it like only did the Hobbit on,
right,
and so they're completely unprepared for everything they're dealing with.
Right.
I thought you knew this Hobbit stuff. So that's what I'm reading. I've got other stuff that I started and never finished, but that's my reading. And I'm doing with discipleship with a couple guys. We're reading through First Corinthians, so there's less spoilers there.
The Bible. Come on.
The Bible. um, so hold on. What else are we doing? What are you watching? You watching anything?
Well, like every other person in the known world, I watched WandaVision.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, I mean, do people still need to talk about it? Because I mean, it's everywhere.
yeah.
Love your new sticker, by the way.
Thank you. I don't actually have one yet. I just designed it and ran away. But I do have prints.
It's good,
dude. I have prints like 11x17, and I did a Comic-Con this past Saturday, and every Wanda cosplayer that walked by, I'd be like, "Hey, Wanda," and they would literally like.
Amazing. I actually did. I said it was funny. Even when I posted it on my social media, I said I don't get to watch anything that isn't kid related recently. Because like if I'm watching TV, it's probably because my kid's sitting next to me. I will say though, here I'll do this one first, then I'll go back to what I do watch with my kid, which is amazing. But I sat down and actually watched a movie. And it was a movie that, because in the rare chances where I do get to watch something, I watch something that neither my wife nor my kid would want to watch. Because I have this long list of those. And I'm like, if I get that if the planets align to the point where I can actually sit down and watch something, if they're not with me, I watch something that's on that list. This is actually a pretty new movie. It says it released in 2021. I don't know exactly the date. Space Sweepers. I'm gonna put this out there.
Go on.
This movie is way better than it deserves to be. In a lot of ways, it is very tropey sci-fi. So it starts off with everyone's destroyed planet Earth. It's just toxic waste dump of a planet now. You can't go anywhere without like super face masks, and you can't breathe, and it's dying. So this amazing scientist created this orbital paradise, but only the elite get to live in the orbital paradise. I'm like, I've heard this literally dozens of times.
It's Snowpiercer, but space.
Kind of.
Okay.
But what you realize is that when you start building stuff up in space, there's stuff that's a problem now, which is random space crap, because we've been throwing up satellites and whatever up there for years now. So it's already a problem. So in this super future, there's even more space debris that is getting in the way of this orbital paradise. So there's this whole business of people in ships catching the debris before it hits anybody and salvaging the stuff to sell and make their money. And so you get a bunch of these crews grabbing this big piece of junk to start the movie, and then all of a sudden, in true like almost anime style, oh my goodness, somebody told me that they weren't even here. Oh man, we gotta run, they're coming. And all of a sudden here it comes, like, with the pounding music and everything. The crew of the Victory shows up and just starts stealing the debris from everybody else. And it's the story of this crew, and I can't get too much into what happens because like it's one of those movies that has a definite twist to it. But like the crew is a trope. Like it's the toughest nails captain who she's seen some stuff but she doesn't talk about it. You got the ex-soldier who's the pilot. You've got he used to be the head of he was a drug kingpin until he decided he wanted to get out of that life. So now he literally is the ship mechanic who literally has an axe on him at all times. And he says that he used to like take the hands of people who stole from him. And of course, you've got the snarky robot.
You have to have the snarky robot.
You have to have the snarky
Is it even
robot.
sci-fi without a snarky robot?
Like I'm watching this trailer. I go, this shouldn't be good. But everybody who I heard talk about it is like, it's really good. It's really fun. It's really great. So I'm like, all right. Noah's in daycare. Susan's at work. let's watch Space Sweepers. Oh my goodness. Like it is a combination. Like don't get me wrong, it is tropey sci-fi. If that really just turns you off, you're not going to like Space Sweepers. It, as much as I'm going to tell you it's good in the way that a lot of the tropey sci-fi I've watched in my life is good. Like I enjoy it, but I can acknowledge it's cheesy. That said, it also has some really good character moments. Like really strong character moments that, again, I would talk about, but it has everything to do with twists and things that get revealed in the plot, so I don't want to mention it. But there are really strong character moments. Um and it's also got some amazing action. At one point, the robot, there's all these ships that are trying to take down the Victory. So they're like, we're gonna get blown up. Somebody do something. Bubs, get out there. So Bubs gets out with a giant freaking harpoon and basically goes ship to ship. It's a harpoon with a cord that's tied to Bubs. He literally is throwing this harpoon, tearing up a ship, throwing it at another one, tearing up the ship. And I'm like, I've never been happier in my entire life than
You know what would have
watching
made it better? A sea shanty.
a sea shanty. It would have. But like it I've seen tropey done well. I've seen comedy done well. I've seen action done well, and I've seen character moments done well. It is something special when you get all of them together and neither one of them ruins the other. Like they all work well.
All right. Fair enough.
And when I am sitting with my son, there is a show that I'm literally working on an article for Love Thy Nerd right now about this show. Like that's how special this show has become to my family. It's a show called Bluey.
I've heard you mention Bluey before.
I
Yes.
will continually mention Bluey. I have no, a kid's show is special when you are a grown man and you are watching it without your kid. I have on multiple occasions watched Bluey when my son is either asleep or not here. Bluey is it's a family. Basically everybody in the neighborhood is dogs. And it's not like Secret Life of Pets dogs, like they're people. Like Bluey's dad is
Anthropomorphic. Yeah.
yeah. Bluey's dad is an archaeologist. Like that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. Um it's Bluey, her sister Bingo, and her parents, and they're all their friends. And I'm not going to lie, that show has brought joy into my life in these quarantine times like little else has. It's so it's both really honest about what the life of a kid looks like the the article I'm writing is basically because I love the dad Bandit. I love him so much. Um like he's at first, when I first started watching, I go, are we going to just have another bumbling dad that's in so many other cartoons and shows and whatever? But he's not. He's goofy and over the top, but at the same point there are so many like honest dad moments with Bandit and Bluey. Like it's so good. And it's so like pure and entertaining. I love all of Bluey's little friends. One of her friends is a dachshund named Snickers, and he's constantly talking about how he can't run as fast as everybody else because of his little sausage legs. Um,
That sounds familiar to my life.
um, like yeah, no, everything. It's so good. Like it's something that um it reminds me of when I was a kid. It's stuff that I love like watching with my son and watching him appreciate it. Um I aspire to be the kind of dad that Bandit is. Like that again, preview for my article. That's what it's about. Like I already pitched it. Like that's what it's about. Um but it I'm a sucker for when you watch kids play and watching Bluey and Bingo and their friends play these ridiculous games. Like there's one episode where they're pretending that they're making this magical thing that's going to help them control their parents. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I did crap like that when I was a kid. Um, they pretend all the time. At one point, they make Bingo gets sick, and you don't know why she's sick, but she's in the hospital, and they make a video for her, and it's the kind of thing that a dad and her and his kid would make for. Like, it's amazing. I love that show so intensely. I now have like Bluey toys, and my son and I play a Bluey board game that was inspired by one episode called Shadowlands, where the whole plot of that episode is that three of the kids um play this game called Shadowlands, where all the ground is shadow and all the sunlight is water that's filled with alligators. And so they have to get from where they are to where their parents are sitting on this little like uh this little shady picnic area. And if you've ever watched a kid play a game like that, you already know that like how that episode's gonna go. Like a car moves and all of a sudden they all start screaming. It's great. So like I love Bluey to death, and I really think that if you have kids and you have Disney Plus, watch Bluey.
What's
If
the age cap on that? Like, what age would a kid think this is too silly or young?
Hector, I'm a 41-year-old man.
Bro, we don't count. I'm talking actual children.
No, I honestly think that it would depend on the kid. Like I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it would depend on the kid. Like I could easily have seen like me at like 12 being like, this is the greatest show ever.
If you like We Bare Bears, is it on that vein?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are I could it's different, but if you're going for feel, I would say if you liked one, you'd probably like the other.
I have a almost 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So
I would be surprised if like they might not like every episode, but there are some episodes that would just make them rolling on the floor. And I will tell you that there are some episodes that are like they're so good that I've literally had conversations with other dads about how powerful like okay, you want a recommendation, everybody listening? There is one episode that is incredibly good called Early Baby. What happens is that it takes place in the kids' school, and they're pretending, and it starts off with an argument between this one guy, Rusty, and three girls, Bluey, her friend Indy, and I think the other one's named Honey. And they're pretending to do something, and then Rusty's pretending to do something else. And by the time the episode is over, the teacher has sat them down, told them why they freaked out, explained to them what's going on, and had them process this whole argument. These kids are supposed to be 6. And you are watching them go through this. I'm like, this is what I want my kids to know about. Like the ability to empathize with what somebody else is doing, seeing where somebody else is coming from. The reason it's called Early Baby is because they were pretending that the one kid's Indy, it's Indy's sister, was premature, and so they were pretending that they were in a hospital and they were going to have an early baby. And like you're watching as these kids are pretending to experience this thing that Indy went through in her real life. And you're watching as these kids are kind of processing the real life stuff that's going on. It's so good. It's so good.
okay, I'm
not even gonna lie. I may watch an episode after we get done here because I love it so much.
well, I'm gonna tell my kids tomorrow. That's something because they have a habit of like repeating things too many times. Like I think they made it through Steven Universe twice in like a short window, and I'm like, please stop.
Yeah. In other news, Disney Plus also finally let me watch Gravity Falls, which is the exact opposite of Bluey. but is awesome.
Well, they did that too. They watched Gravity Falls there as well. So yeah, that was another thing. I don't have anything I'm really even watching right now. My life doesn't have like a watch vibe to it at the moment. Um, but I'm rewatching Sherlock, or I'm watching Sherlock with my 13-year-old for the first time. Um,
Like the Benedict Cumberbatch.
yeah.
Nice.
Whenever we just passed a year of like when she turned 12, we had the talk, um, like a very detailed version of the talk and everything else, and because she wanted to be able to watch mature things,
Right.
and like I didn't want her learning about anatomy from Dwight Schrute, so
Nobody should learn anything from Dwight Schrute.
and so like she spent the last year like making a checklist of all the grown-up shows that fit in her category that she's allowed to watch. And so we made it through Luther, and now we're watching Sherlock. And so I haven't watched Sherlock since it originally aired, and I'm seeing so many other things that I really love. But I'm just watching that with her, but I don't have anything I'm personally watching. All right, eating. Anything that you're like totally loving food wise these days?
I can't say that I have. Um yeah, no. My days are, in the morning I wake up, I take care of my son. At night I'm working my night shift, and in the middle I try to do like ministry stuff or just pass out on the couch to maybe catch up something. Like, so eating for me has become very, it's just what I have to do to keep being able to do everything else. Um I will say that there's, I don't know what it is. Like, I can't even describe it. Like, my wife has found this recipe for this amazing like curried chicken dish. She's been making it a lot recently. That's amazing, but I couldn't tell you anything about it because she just makes it and just gives it to me and I just eat it. um but yeah, no, I can't really say that anything like my eating has become either very functional, or like I eat a lot of things in that's wrapped in flour tortillas now because it's really easy to follow after my son with food in a wrap.
Yep, fair.
Um or it was either very functional or very just what I could grab at the moment, which is, oftentimes fast food of varying degrees of quality.
I've got like there's only one thing like I'm actually I'm very similar on the thing because I don't eat breakfast. Personally, like to keep me from ballooning during quarantine. I went the intermittent fasting route of like I only eat from 12 to 8. And so that helps me because normally in the middle of the night between boredom and my feelings is where I would eat all of my calories. But there's this one restaurant near-ish me, called Archway, and it's just a burger and dogs place. But dude, it's one of those where they just give you a sheet of every possible ingredient.
Okay. Yep.
Um,
I know the vibe.
and they're all handmade patties. It's grilled to perfection type deal. But like, I have a simple disc burger that is a single patty, um, sriracha chipotle mayo, um, bacon, uh, pimento cheese, and a fried green tomato. And that is my standard burger. And like I only get it like once every month to 6 weeks, when I'm going to like support a local comic book shop. Like that's one Wednesday because I divide my support between three comic shops to like share the love right now.
Right.
And so like they're all in far distances. So like when I go to one, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna eat this place, I'm gonna go to this place, I'm gonna come home. And so like I just had that this past Wednesday, and I'm like, that's so wonderful. It's like I don't have any other food that's ever noteworthy. What about drinking? Is there anything like just jumped out to you beverage world wise?
Um, I can't really say that there has been. Um, I've concocted, what I normally do in the morning is that I'm I'm not the first to wake up. My son is the first to wake up, but then his little voice is in my ear saying, "Dad, let's get up." And so I'm up usually shortly after he is. And my first action, it's not even for me, it's more for my wife because she actually has to get up and leave in the morning. Is I make coffee, and it's your standard drip coffee. I will get I'll actually I'll get one of my mason jars, fill that up halfway with coffee, pour in a pack of hot cocoa, stir that up, and then the rest of it's milk, and that gets me through a large portion of my morning. Because
All right.
remember, I work night shift and I wake up with a 3-year-old.
No, fair, fair.
Yeah.
You need some chocolate and caffeine in your day start. So I'm with you.
Yep.
I've I'm a black coffee drinker. Just like it was one of our church does a thing every January of like we start the year out with like fasting for 3 weeks in some fashion. Like
Mhm.
everybody's challenged to do their own thing. And like one of those years, like I gave up coffee creamer and sugar, like because I was just doing I think I was doing Daniel fast, but I was gonna do black coffee because it was a sacrifice. And and I've been doing that for like the past 4 years now, like just black coffee. So that's kind of my thing. But because I made some British friends, uh I started drinking like tea, like
I love a I love a good glass of tea. I really do.
and but like we got a kettle, like so like we have like a whistling kettle going on in our house, and so like I bought this like blue ribbon box of like 50 different random flavors.
Nice.
And because I don't know how to do things in moderation, I'll like put two flavors together and drink two bags in one glass. So that's fun. I do that. But then the other cool thing I've been doing lately, and I have to do this in moderation just because it's a lot of sugar for me. Um, but Coca-Cola with coffee. Um,
I've seen people tout this beverage.
um, it sounds like something I would have made in middle school. Um, but like legitimately, this is the dark blend, and you have to like coffee if you're going to drink this one. Like
Okay.
you have to be okay with I can taste the earth in my glass and that'd be all right.
Mm.
If you're gonna do the dark blend, the vanilla one, I legitimately think anybody that could drink a vanilla Coke or vanilla Pepsi, you'll be fine. And
Okay.
then the caramel one is somewhere in between. But what because I'm so used to drinking black coffee that
Right.
having sugar in coffee to me
In coffee.
is like, ooh, what's happening? The world's I can feel the curvature of the earth. I mean, and it's like that. And so and because this is like pretty narrow, like I could drink this in one sip, really. And I'm like, okay, this is dangerous. Don't do it again. Um, but I'm enjoying that a lot. But just between hot tea, and man, that's another beautiful thing about hot tea is like the lack of calories. So
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. And I think just the last thing, like, what are you playing? Are you playing anything? You know, it's not like you play games or anything.
Yeah. No. Right now playing is difficult because most of my game playing is in tabletop form.
Yeah. I didn't
Thankfully
know if you were one of those online tabletop people.
I am, but again, when I have a morning filled with a toddler and a night filled with night shift work, it becomes challenging to find somebody who's able to play games with.
Okay.
Um, so I have a list of my aspirational gaming. I also have a list of things that I do play. Um, One of the things that has been great, especially because I know people who have the paid version of a paid account, so they can start up the games. I haven't had to get the account yet. It's a website called Board Game Arena, and Board Game Arena it's basically a website. It's entirely browser based, so you don't have to like buy software or anything, and you just play games. And so, oddly enough, there's a card game that I got right before all of this happened, and I hadn't been able to play it because all of this happened. It's called The Crew, and The Crew it's a trick taking game. So if you've ever played like hearts or spades or anything like that, that's a trick taking game. But it's not about it's a cooperative trick taking game. You're all trying to accomplish certain goals. Like you have to make it so that certain players have to get certain cards, or you have to make sure that certain players don't win any tricks, or like there's missions that you have to do. Like the whole idea is that you're going through space and you have to do all these different missions, and that each one is a different goal. Some of
Does
them
anyone
hard.
have a sassy robot with a harpoon?
No, they should though. Um, but at least who knows? Maybe there's a mission in there that I haven't gotten to yet. That's a sassy robot with a harpoon. I think that's required, or I'm going to put one in. But I've been playing that on Board Game Arena a lot, and it seems like it would be so easy. How hard could it be if you're all working together? Well, the thing is that other than like one card at a time, per game, you can't tell anybody what's in your hand. So it's not like you're all playing with open hands saying, oh, clearly, you play this and then you play this. You have to guess what play you're going to make that will allow so and so to get that card. And so it actually ends up being incredibly complicated. And then there are things I'm playing in two different games right now because it's asynchronous. So I can do it like I'll play my move and then it'll get to the other people when it gets to them. But it gets so complicated. It's like this one has to this goal has to be completed after this goal, but this goal can be done at any time. But this goal has to like be the last thing you do. And you're just like, how do we make that work without telling each other what we have in our hands? How do we make that work? And so it's rules wise, it's a simple card game, but it's hard to pull off sometimes. That's been fun to play. The other game I just got done playing, which I have the board over there. It's a gorgeous game that is actually one of my more. It's up there. It's not in my top 10 or anything, but it's up there in my collection. It's a game called Abyss, and it's hard to describe Abyss without going into a full like breakdown of it. It's not like basically you're getting little. It's all underwater, and you're all like sea creatures, like the lords of the sea. The whole idea is that the king of the ocean has died, and everybody's trying to jockey for the position and who's going to be the heir. And so thematically, you're trying to bring these lords of the ocean on your side to back you as the heir to the throne. And so you're doing it by petitioning their followers to get them on board, and getting them on board gets you the points. Whoever has the most points at the end wins and becomes the king of the ocean. It's a gorgeous game. It's like you could really do it with just a deck of cards, but they're like, no, we're gonna do these elaborate things. Like this artwork is gorgeous. Like the currency you use, they literally have little pearls, like little plastic pearls that is your currency. But I've played that, and I love that game. I love it playing it on the board, but I've had fun playing it on Board Game Arena. Aspirationally, some amazing sales have been going on in the board game and role playing game world. So one I got because I've been fascinated by it. It's a role playing game called Alice is Missing. It's a silent role playing game. You play it texting each other.
Shut your mouth. What?
You are literally like the whole idea is this girl named Alice is gone, is missing. And you're all playing as characters, like friends of hers, her parents, like different characters. And you're all trying to figure out what happened to Alice, but you're not talking. You literally have to text each other to make your decisions, and like you're playing as these characters, like they probably would in real life if they're not standing next to each other. They're texting each other to figure out what to do next. I might be able to pull this off online, but I really need to get the right crew. So I want to play that one.
That's bananas, dude.
The other one, I like this game. I watched several reviews of it. There's some game reviewers that I love called their show is called Shut Up and Sit Down. When they did this review ages ago, when the game first came out, I'm like, I need this game, but it sold out. I couldn't find it. I could find it on Amazon for like $100, but that's not going to happen. So I had some Patreon money that I'd scrolled away for fun times, and I said, let's just see if this game is on the store that I go to. And they only had 3 copies left. And so I'm like, I don't want to miss it again. I don't know when another print run's going to happen. I don't know. I'm going to show you this cover, and I'm going to tell you this is just part of how gorgeous this game is. It's called Inish. And yes, you pronounce it with ish at the end. And it's basically it's an area control game where you're all playing as different Celtic clans, but I mean the board, it's all just tiles that look like this.
Dude.
Do I have I don't know if I separated the cards yet, because the artwork on the cards is something else I have to show. Yeah, like this is, that's card artwork right there. So like like I said, I had some Patreon money sitting there, and I'm like, I need to. This is a game that I got, and I have no idea when I'm going to get to play it, because this is it's not a heavy game, but it's heavier. And I'm currently in a position where I'm recruiting gamers, like people who don't game. I'm trying to convince them that gaming is good. That's a little intense for that crowd.
Yeah, absolutely.
but it's so gorgeous that I'm like, I need to own it. And then the last aspirational game is another role-playing game, which a friend of mine got me this book. Now, I'm going to tell you that I have a love for Alice in Wonderland that is almost unnatural.
Okay. I have a friend who's really passionate about American McGee's Alice.
I have played American McGee's Alice. I enjoy it thoroughly. I really like what they did with the idea of if Wonderland is in Alice's head, what happens when Alice has severe trauma. But my favorite role-playing game system is this thing called the Cypher system, and the Cypher system put out We're All Mad Here. It is a fairy tale based role-playing game. My friend got me this book. I have not been able to play it yet, and it hurts me that it's sitting on my shelf not being used yet. I mean, yeah. This is just one of my friends love me, and they know how much I love that role-playing system. They actually backed a Kickstarter on my behalf. Not only this one, but there's fairy tales, there's a space one, there's a zombie one, or a horror one, I should say. And I think they're coming out with, there's another one called Godforsaken. And it's literally like what happens if like every depiction of every supernatural deity was real and they're gone now. And I'm sitting there, I've got all these books just staring at me, and not a one of them has been played yet. And I'm hoping that I can fix that soon.
I imagine that is a big struggle, because, like, I mean, obviously you're the person I know that has the most, like, tabletop, desire in their life that I know of.
I do a bit.
And like, because I see between you and Chris Poirier, like that's, I don't know. I'm too much the introvert part of me. Like I only like being an extrovert when I've got something to hide behind. Like give me a booth, a table.
I mean, that was literally when you guessed it on Bard and Bible. That's literally what you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, you know where I'm at. Like I've never been much of a tabletop person, because like the interaction with people has always been like, I'm good. Like I'm always have so many issues with that. So I'm more of a video gamer. But man, like I kickstarted the Trogdor game. Just because I love Strong Bad. And we played that. I think it's a terrible game. But
it's not as bad as some other clearly targeting your nostalgia games that I've seen in my life, but it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I was like, man, I'm not even a tabletop gamer, and I can tell the mechanics on this are weak sauce.
Yeah.
But did I pay extra to get the little card figures? Absolutely, I did.
Yes, you
Um,
did.
um, but my kids have put between that and we played a lot of Dice Throne,
Dice Throne
which
is great.
is really functional for my family. I've been playing, just wrapping up on that. Like my Switch has been my friend.
Nice.
If I can, yeah, get that visually, I don't know.
There you go. It's good enough.
Good enough. Um, Animal Crossing, is the thing that a lot of gamers picked up during the pandemic or right at the beginning.
Yep.
A lot of people have let it die, and like that's for me. Like I have one villager on my island that is my favorite villager, and I only log in just to make sure she won't leave.
I just got to check in.
I legit like an estranged husband that's traveling for business or something. Like I roll in, hey, here's a gift. Nice to chat with you. I'll be back in 2 months. Bye. And like that's it. That's all I do. But recently they added Mario elements to it.
Okay.
So you can now put warp pipes, uh like flagpoles, um like thwomps and question blocks all over your island, and you can get costumes of all the Mario characters. So the fact that like when you walk on my island there's a thwomp like
Nice.
or you have to walk under question blocks, and it was like that's made me get on there. Hyrule Warriors The Age of Calamity, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. And this effectively this is like Clone Wars to Legend of Zelda. Um,
Okay.
it is not the in-depth, high budget, eat your life away trying to make it happen game. But what it is it adds a lot of the backstory, because when Breath of the Wild starts, the four main support characters to the game are dead, and you're just finding out some of their flashbacks and stuff throughout the game.
Wow.
Um, this game actually gives you a prequel to everything, sort of, but you get to play as all the characters that were dead when you started Breath of the Wild. So the four champions from Breath of the Wild are the best, and that's it. And then the other one is fitness boxing 2,
Okay.
just on a sheer cardio thing. Like I'm watching my kids be home all the time for not school,
Right.
and like watching me be home a lot in the winter because it's cold. And honestly, I don't mind going to the gym, but our gym is 100% mask policy right now, and I don't mind wearing a mask in public for the safety of others.
Right.
But you put a fat man on an elliptical machine with a mask, and you're asking for me to die.
Yeah.
It's my lungs aren't that awesome. Um, so I got fitness boxing, and dude, um, I soaked through a sweatshirt in 30 minutes.
Nice.
And that's nice. The other thing is it's competitive and it unlocks songs, and it's just like you wouldn't think I'd be really pumped to unlock YMCA and a new outfit for my trainer, but by golly, I am.
When you get in, man, that's how they get you.
And that's the thing though, like you can also compete in your workout against somebody else. And when you're competitive and your actual object of the game is throwing punches,
Right.
it's like there's been times my daughter's like done a hook or a uppercut better than me. I'm like, jack you up. I'm already throwing punches. Um, the other thing I'm playing, and I don't even say this with a lot of enthusiasm, but I'm playing Cyberpunk 2077 only because I purchased it and I didn't open it until after the refund window had closed.
Okay.
Because I was finishing off Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I didn't even want to open it until I was done with that. And Cyberpunk, like when playing it, it just feels like I can see all the potential.
And how little potential was reached.
Yeah. I can see all the potential, and just feels like it just feels sloppy. And like it's like I would literally schedule time. Oh man, I need to get to Assassin's Creed because I want to get further in the story.
Right.
because it was a masterpiece of storytelling in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
This, I'm like, if I am bored and need something moderately violent, here we go. Um, and that's like, okay. And that's just like thing. It's like honestly felt like it rode the wave of Keanu Reeves fandom, like that resurgence, and this here we are.
Yeah. Well, Cyberpunk, like they've been pushing that game for like a really long time.
They really have.
People have been waiting. Like I remember when they put out the first images promoting that game, and to put it out to hype it that long and not deliver is not okay.
Oh no, that's the thing. Like the fact that the company offered a refund without question. I'm like, how bad do you have to screw up to offer a refund? I've never in my life seen a video game company offer a blanket refund.
Right.
Um, and I'm finishing it. And here's the deal: like, if you were playing it on the new gen consoles, it's a lot better.
Right.
Um, I've only had a couple issues. But the end of the day thing is like it's just not that compelling of a story. Um, I mean the basic gist is you're a thug, you remotely die, and in that process a microchip is implanted in your head that heals you, but also implants a working anagram of Keanu Reeves's character into your brain, and it's basically putting Keanu Reeves's mind into your body,
Right.
and you're just literally trying to find the appropriate amount of people in this godforsaken city that can figure out how to get this thing out of your head before it kills you. Meanwhile, the entire time you've got Keanu Reeves over your shoulder talking trash.
Okay.
And it's just like, and it's like, and I think they honestly went overboard on the, we know how debaucherous you want to be in a game. And I'm
Right.
like, no, not
I I,
really.
I've seen some pictures.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm like, when I'm seeing some of the stuff, I'm like, oh, for real, guys? All right. Why do I need to pick that up? Oh, no. Like, because I'm a, with a loot and shoot, usually just pick up everything. And then I'm looking through my inventory. I'm like,
Yeah, no, there's lots of things you don't want to pick up.
yeah, in real life or in the game. And I'm
Right.
just like, oh, no. Um, so that's the input, man. That's all the stuff I'm putting into like dude, thank you for hanging out and chatting with me. It's like, and it's just really neat to see the stuff that people are actually interested in and that they're putting into their lives. Um,
Well, it was fun. I was talking to my wife about this. I had an old friend of mine message me. Uh, it's like I saw this picture of this old bowling alley and I thought of you. And it's not it's a bowling alley. That's not what gets me. It's the fact that it's very steampunk aesthetic. I'm like, I haven't mentioned steampunk in years. But at the same point, I also used to write a fiction blog that lasted for about a year and a half, and I had like fans. So it's fun to kind of dig up stuff that hasn't seen the light of day for a while and just kind of enjoy that.
Absolutely. Winter glasses. Um, but man, thank you so much for just sharing what you're putting into your life and taking the time to talk about it. And if you, for the people that are listening or watching, um, and they want to check you out and see your work that you're doing with Inroads and with Game Store Profits and all the stuff that you're putting out there with your content, where should they go check you out at?
The short answer is inroadsministries.com. It's inroads with two N's, because every good gamer knows that all roads lead to the inn. And yeah, I've been having some fun with some stuff lately. I have the weirdest Christian devotional podcast you're ever going to listen to.
Fair.
It starts off with a trip to a weird little tavern called the Bard and Bible in this fictional land called the Nine Realms. Um,
By the way, just not to like crazy interrupt, but just to ask, have you made tavern mugs yet?
No, I haven't.
Because
As
I'm just throwing it out there that if you made like legit tavern mugs
yeah.
that said the Barden Bible, I'd buy that.
No,
Go
I
on.
I know that it's one of those things that it's hard to obtain said things uh in a way that doesn't involve boxes sitting in my basement.
We're gonna Redbubble that or something, man. We're
There
gonna
we
make
go.
that happen.
We'll figure it out. But yeah, so I've had a lot of fun with that. I recently just put out the second of what is going to be hopefully a long lasting series of what I call the Parables of the Nine Realms, where I take a Bible story and I figure out what it would look like if I rewrote that Bible story in my weird fictional world. It was especially fun because the most recent one gave a lot of the history of the Nine Realms at the front end of it, which is fun because I was retelling the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, which is like a paragraph. I made it into an 11-minute audio drama. um, but yeah, so I have that. If you want to support me making stuff for my ministry, I'm also on Patreon at patreon.com/dwarfbard.
Awesome. And all of the links for all of this stuff will be in there on the post, so you can check that out as well. And just as well, I want to say thank you to my patrons. Patreon. I always get screwed up on the tenses of that. The
Right?
people that support my Patreon.
Yeah.
I just want to give a quick shout out: Zach, Caleb, Jeanette, Chris. You can figure out which one's which. Jason, Christina, Sarah, Rebecca, Adam, and Stephanie, as well as Todd, Turner, and Love Thy Nerd as well, just for being just encouraging supporters. Thank you guys for making this stuff possible. And I'd encourage you, like, Mike has a pod, with his podcast, it's $1 to be able to hear it, right? At least $1.
If you're in there for the lowest, which is $1, you can get in early. I do have goal, like when if you're not familiar with Patreon, the people create like if I get this much per month, I'll do this. I want to do like more specific Patreon content, but I have to be able to look at my wife and say, look how much money I'm earning by making this content, to allow me to actually have the time in my day to make it. So I'm hoping to get some video stuff on there. I want to do more audio stuff on Patreon. Occasionally I'll do some writing, because despite the fact that I have a lot of friends that host different articles, I have a lot of I do my own articles. There are some things that hit my head and I'm like, this doesn't fit any of those. And so my Patreon's becoming a place where I can do that. Like, I reflected on my own sin while playing Play-Doh with my son on our dining room, on our living room floor. That's a thing that my patrons get to read. Um, so yeah, and then you know, when I started setting up the Patreon, like my Patreon is literally about a year old. I've done it for I started it right at the beginning of the pandemic.
I'm probably like June or something, but yeah, I'm not far behind you.
So when I started it, the people I know who have been doing it for a while said, put a goal out there that's just insane, that you don't think you'll ever do, because you never know, somebody might make it so that happens. And like some of the goals on there is one, the absolute extreme goal is that Inroads becomes my job and not my ministry that I pay to do.
Oh, I know that. I know that feeling, bro.
So people are like, oh, don't you get Inroads money? No, bro, not a dime.
Dude,
Um,
like I was worried about the money that Faith and Fandom wasn't going to bring in during 2020, and
right.
my wife pulled me aside. She's like, "Man, we saved so much money with you not
With you
doing
not
Faith."
going to convention, yeah. Oh yeah, no, there are so many things that people are like, oh, you must be able to do this and that. I go, no, man, I don't make any money. But like, so my ultimate goal is that this becomes my job and I can make this content. Because like one thing, and you can appreciate this as somebody who makes content. Content takes a lot longer to make than people think about. And so like when I do one of these parables, it's a full audio cast. Like I have to audition those. I have to write it. I have to audition. I got to get the recordings. I got to edit it. I got to find the appropriate sound effects. It usually takes me weeks to get one together. And so I want to do, there's levels where I can get one of those out a quarter. There's one where I get like Inroads is my job and I can focus on making cool content. There's one where I showed my source book for this. There's one level where I'm going to work on taking all my various notes and story elements and turn that into a system agnostic role-playing game source book so that people can play role-playing games in the 9 realms. Like there's some crazy stuff I want to see happen on there. And yeah, maybe someday it'll happen. Right now, I'm super thankful for every one of my supporters that helps me do what I do, and they've always been super encouraging. In fact, a lot of them, I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot of my supporters, I'm like, okay, here's all the stuff you get for supporting at the level you're supporting, and they're like, no, don't worry, dude. Like I want to give you this money. And it literally makes me tear up every time that happens. It's such a blessing to see people kind of support what I do that way.
That's awesome, man. And if you haven't checked out Mike's stuff, it's worth checking out, and you should. Dude, thank you so much for.
You can even check. I do what's called the Wandering Bards Guild, where I have guest hosts, and Hector did one.
I did.
The legend of a, or what? How did you put it?
Fluffy halfling.
Yeah, something is a fluffy halfling.
Yeah. Is it fear? No, it's not fear. I don't know what it is. It was
we recorded it a while ago, so
it's been a minute. There's been a lot of hours logged behind.
There's been a lot of life that's happened between you recording that and
yes. But man, thank you so much for hanging out and sharing. I know you have a long day and you have a lot of parenting and adulting, and
dude, quarantine life is hitting hard. I know you and I have both mentioned that quarantine kind of sucks for isolation. Being able to sit and talk nerd stuff and just have this conversation has been a blessing. I hate using that word over and over and over again, but it's true.
It's a good descriptive word.
Hashtag blessed. But yeah. But
hashtag blessed life.
But yeah, it's just good to do this because nerds got a nerd, man. It's got to happen.
Well, once again, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you are listening to this on your podcast provider of choice, please like and review, subscribe, do all the things like that. And feel free to share it on your social media and check the links below for a list of the things that we talked about, as well as finding all of Mike's socials as well. If you haven't visited the website recently or in a while, check out faithandfandom.org, where you can find not only all the podcasts and our store, but also I think we're currently up to 150 devotionals are up there, including
the new one from WandaVision that I just listened to on my podcast feed.
So there you go. That's all up there, and the one next is going to be one on Howl's Moving Castle. So unless something jumps out quicker, because Howl's Moving Castle was supposed to come before WandaVision, but that didn't work out. But thanks for sharing what has input into your life, and also if you're listening, feel free to answer those questions on the comments, and we look forward to talking with you soon.